Hi everyone, welcome back to another video review. I'm literally recording this right after the Assassin's Creed Valhalla one, so you're getting them a little bit back to back. If you don't know me, my name's Delilah, aka ASSASSINA-san. Welcome to my channel, and if you've been here, welcome back, and thank you for coming back. Thank you for sticking around. Today we are reviewing Outriders. So here's the deal, I'm already a sucker for cooperative shooters, especially ones that involve powers like Destiny. They tend to be fun experiences to have with friends even if they lack a good story. It's just kind of fun to shoot some shit with friends. And Outriders came at a perfect time to scratch that itch. With all of the coverage that happened before Outriders release, I had a feeling that the story and the environments were gonna be a bit lackluster, but the gameplay loop looked fun enough to reel me in. I think People Can Fly definitely bolstered Outriders' release success by adding a demo a whole month in advance and allowing that progress to transfer over to your main game. And even with the demo, the narrative around Outriders was still like, I'm not gonna rush to play it, but it's kind of fun. Then People Can Fly bolstered the release of Outriders even more by adding it to Gamepass, so those people that were on the fence maybe jumped over the fence. Maybe a lot of gamers that already had the Gamepass service had no excuse but to try the game because it was available at no extra cost and came out during a time where no other games were releasing. Outriders releasing on Gamepass is just another reason why this is such a consumer-friendly service that can help a game do well, and also giving gamers the opportunity to try a game without risking paying full price for something that they might end up not liking or playing. I do think though that despite being on Game Pass, Outriders would have probably been buried if it released a few weeks later when all of the game releases came out, like Resident Evil Village, Nier Replicant, Returnal, Mass Effect Legendary Edition, and all the games that came out pretty much each week back to back. Unfortunately, I think that if people actually paid for this game, many would have demanded refunds because there were so many issues persisting months after the game released. There were so many issues connecting to servers. I had to wait anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour to finally get into the game. And then there were other issues that came with some of those fixes, like inventory wipes that persisted a month after the game's release. And the team definitely worked hard to communicate with players of what fixes were happening and their awareness of the issues, and they seemed to be hard at work to fix them. But I do think gamers only really accepted this because they didn't have to pay an extra penny for the product if they had Game Pass, which I think is how most people played Outriders. I probably would have reviewed this game sooner if I didn't have to wait anywhere between 30 minutes and an hour to get into this game up until about a month ago. I always expect that these types of games have issues within the first 2 weeks, but the fact that Outriders had issues past a month of its release is a little bit unacceptable, but I'm not going to harp on it because I still had a good time. Another cool thing that Outriders had is crossplay, and although I didn't experience crossplay during the main release, during the demo I played with PC players while I played on my PS5, and the crossplay process was pretty seamless, using a code system to play with friends on other platforms. I did hear that there were crossplay issues when the game released, and I think that as of this recording they have been fixed, but I didn't actually play with anyone but PS5 players upon release. But at this point, crossplay is still a novelty and quickly becoming a requirement. So kudos to People Can Fly for including this in Outriders. I think People Can Fly made a lot of good decisions that led to the success of Outriders. Releasing a demo a month in advance where progress can transfer over, crossplay, adding it to Game Pass, and another thing that I thought was pretty genius is they didn't market this game as a games as service game. This means that you play Outriders, you play the story, there's some endgame content, and that's it. No expansions, no DLC, no future path for the game as of now. This means that you play the story and a little bit of endgame content, and that's it. You're not expected to get expansions or DLC or more content added to the game aside from what you got at the game release. And because it is a looter shooter type game, it is constantly compared to games as service games like The Division, like Destiny, and I kind of get that in terms of core gameplays, but Outriders not being a games as service severely managed expectations, and it's a strategy that I think a game like Anthem would have severely benefited from. But to maximize your time, you could do side quests and bounties, and after you beat the main story, there are endgame activities called drop pods pod expeditions that offer legendary loot, better loot altogether, opportunity to max out your world tier, and just continue looting and shooting some shit. Maybe it'll be a surprise if they add more content to the game depending on reception, but it won't be expected. It'll just be like, hey, we have something worthy of releasing, here you go. What Outriders offered is really all we needed, a satisfying gameplay loop that you can play solo or with friends. Outriders is a third-person shooter that handles a lot like Gears of War with powers, which is no surprise because People Can Fly worked on Gears of War Judgment. And like Gears, there's an intuitive cover system, but the combat felt a bit disjointed because the game encourages you to get an enemy's face and be aggressive and not hide behind cover so that you can regenerate health, which that aggressiveness felt a little bit like Doom. The messaging of the combat felt a little bit inconsistent when the game is telling you to be aggressive and get an enemy's face, but there's so much cover available to hide behind. But the cover didn't by any means take away from me being aggressive. Instead, it was actually a saving grace for reviving teammates, taking a breather when my health was critically low, or if my abilities needed to finish their cooldown. And this was all just to run back into the chaos to regain health and clear the map. So although the combat messaging was a bit inconsistent, I still really enjoyed the aggressive gunplay. Because in Outriders you're not just shooting because your character is giving powers, it feels a lot like Destiny in that way. You can combine your own abilities together to do some devastating damage, or you can combine abilities with people that you're playing with. There are 4 classes, including the Pyromancer that does mid-range DPS with fire, the Devastator that does close-range attacks and is the tank, the Technomancer, which is proposed to be a long-range support, which is kind of true, but it was kind of an OP class, which was actually cryogenic, that can freeze enemies and deploy turrets that can heal on kill and can heal teammates. It was really OP. My partner played as the Technomancer and I kind of wish that I picked that class, but instead I picked the Trickster, which is a close-range DPS class that served like a rogue character with teleportation and abilities to slow enemies down or turn them into skeletons and make them weaker. Each of these classes felt unique from one another, and if you really want more freshness in the gameplay, you can play as all the classes. Each class has a set of different skills that you can switch on the fly. For example, as a Trickster, I would switch between a tornado ability that would be good for crowd control, especially when fighting beasts because it staggered them. And when I was fighting humans, I would switch to teleportation abilities that would help me run in, do major damage, and then quickly retreat back for safety. Having a variety of skills to mix and match made the combat always feel fresh. And like I said, if you really want more freshness, you can play as all the classes, which you can switch easily in the main lobby, but your progress and your inventory do not transfer over. In addition to the different skills, you have a skill tree that branches into 3 paths. There's an anomaly, a health, and a weapons path. You can mix and match and choose perks in different trees, or you can focus on one tree path. But the absolute best part about this is that you can respec at any time and for free. It's not like, oh, you have to pay this amount of money to respec your skill tree. Nope, you can just do it whenever you want to, which is really helpful to change up things for different combat sequences. Can more games do this, please? Like any other shooter, you're given a variety of weapons like a sniper, an SMG, an assault rifle, a shotgun, a sidearm, and they come in different rarity like common, rare, epic, or legendary. The quality of your loot is dependent on your world tier, which serves as the difficulty setting in this game. Playing at max world tier will reward you with the best loot. And the better the loot, the more perks you can equip. There are so many different perks that you unlock, from dismantling gear that ranges from health on kill, inflicting fire damage, increasing shields with specific class abilities, and so much more. These perks can be applied to your weapons and your gear. And while my gear may have been extremely useful in getting through max world tier missions, I barely ever looked cool. I had a cool cape once, and then I found better gear and immediately swapped it out. A simple transmog system could have aided this, but instead I was stuck with a bunch of ugly ponchos. In terms of cosmetics, this game isn't really that good. The gear was not that good looking, you didn't have any autonomy over what you wore, and the character creation was minimal. But you could get unlocks for your truck, which is basically your fast travel point, for your checkpoint flags, and for emotes. You mostly unlock these cosmetic items for your truck, your flags, and your emotes when you complete certain objectives to earn attribute points. For example, you'll earn attribute points by killing 100 enemies with an assault rifle or with a class-specific ability. So let's double back to the world tier difficulty system. I really liked how you could change it at any moment. If you were having a little trouble with a certain enemy encounter, you can lower the world tier so that it's not as difficult. But if you did keep it at the highest world tier, you were rewarded with better loot. I found playing on the highest world tier made most combat encounters feel like a puzzle. Whenever I would die and retry, I always tried to find different ways to move strategically around the map, because enemies do quickly move into you and flank around you, and it can be very easy to get overwhelmed on the highest world tier. While I truly love the challenge, there were two specific encounters in the game where it felt really imbalanced, and there was a huge difficulty spike for no reason. They were so bad that I almost wanted to lower the world tier. Although I didn't ultimately, it was very painstaking. I don't mind things being challenging at all. In fact, I welcome it at most times, but what I really don't like that games do quite often is when the difficulty spike is so drastic. I wish it was more progression based. The absolute worst combat encounter was against the last boss, because he felt completely different from everything else that I faced in the game, and the checkpoints were very unforgiving. Thankfully, the game doesn't force you to stay at max world tier. You can change the world tier anytime. Nothing in the game forced me to struggle, just my pride. What made the combat extra satisfying, aside from the smooth gunplay and the cool abilities, is the enemy variety. Too often, these types of games rely on bullet spongy enemies, where as things get more difficult or you progress, instead of giving you a different enemy, it gives you the same enemy with more health bars. Kinda boring. I was actually really impressed with the enemy variety offered in Outriders. There's a handful of human enemies that have a range of weapons and behaviors. There's elite humans, which are usually altered like your character, where they create magical obstacles to avoid, like lasers, fire, or giant orbs. And they also have fire abilities or cryogenic abilities like some of the classes that you get to play as. In addition to humans, there's also different type of beasts that inflict various status effects. There's also elite beasts that take a lot of damage and require a lot of dodge rolling and gunning to defeat. I've fought a bunch of beasts like mutated spiders, birds, bugs, and other alien creatures. I never got tired of fighting in this game because the combat is so satisfying and the enemy variety kept things very fresh. Oh yeah, notice I haven't said much about the story and the environments, and that's because I think they're a little bit of an afterthought in this game. The setup seems like a cool, old school, like 90s sci-fi comic book where Earth becomes inhabitable, thus leading survivors to another planet called Enoch. Enoch becomes overcome by an event called the Anomaly, which infects, kills, and in your character's case, alters, because you were given powers after you were inflicted by the anomaly. Here you face many alters, you gain allies, and you try to survive. Sounds cool, except I never once felt connected to any of the characters, including the one I created. Everyone was just overly dramatic and the dialogue uninteresting. There wasn't a single second in the game where I was like, what's gonna happen next? What's going on with this character? I just wanted to shoot some shit. Enoch did have a variety of biomes, but they all lacked detail, and exploring wasn't fun because the map system is very confusing and navigating to objectives felt very unclear. You would think that because you could set a waypoint on the map that things wouldn't be so confusing to navigate, but even adding a waypoint was often misleading. For a game that lacked so much polish and had less than satisfactory story and environment, I still had a lot of fun playing with friends. And that's because the combat is extremely satisfying and the gameplay loop didn't get stale even after platinuming it. The biggest win for Outriders is not being a games as service and releasing on Gamepass. This way, no one can complain about the lack of expansions, and if People Can Fly decides to add more content, then cool. Everybody wins. So thank you so much for watching this video review. Let me know all your thoughts, agree, disagree with me. Anything I missed about Outriders, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your opinion on the game if you played it, or perhaps this review helped you decide whether you're gonna pick it up or not. Please let me know all the details in the comments. I really love to hear from you guys. You have no idea. So thank you so much for watching. Until the next review, and most importantly, take care of yourselves.